When you're doing measurements as a cut man or something, you don't have to go carrying a little tablet or a spiral notebook or something like that. There's usually all kinds of scraps of wood around, and they make a fine little writing tablet. A lot of times what somebody will do, say they're framing in the soffit, which is like your overhang on the thing, and they'll say, I need a piece 4 5/16, 1 35 1/8, 1 7. Well, you're not going to remember all those, most of us. And so what you do is grab a piece of wood and just write down the measurements so that you can cut those. And by the way, when you cut those pieces, like you can tell, anybody that can't tell the difference between a piece that's 4 5/16 and a piece that's 35 1/8, they ought to go home. But what I'm saying is, if I was the cut man, I was marking these, I'd cut the 4 5/16 first, and I'd write on piece 4 5/16. So that way, if I get some that are close, like, well, that's not even that close, but 7 5/8 and 8 3/4 aren't that much different, and I want him to know which one is which. So when I cut it, leave my line, whatever I'm doing, and I mark on it what the measurement is before I pass it up to them, so that they know what piece that they're trying to put up where. The other thing is, for example, if you're cutting a piece of plywood for somebody, sometimes you have to cut these odd shapes, but you can see, you look up where the hole is that you're trying to cover up, and you can see that's the basic shape. And he's going to give you a description. For example, that's going to be your square or your factory edge. Your factory edge is an edge that is there existing on the piece of board like it came from the factory. So you've got your square edge here, and he's going to say something like this. All right, I'm going to need a piece that's 57 1/8 to the long, 22 to the short, and then from the long point down, it's going to be 13 1/4. And they should be able to describe it that way. You draw your little diagram, and then you just fill in the values as they describe them for you. So now you lay a piece of plywood on your cut bench, oriented like that. You measure across the top 57 1/8. You measure across the bottom 22, and then at 57 1/8, you come straight down 13 1/4. Connect these 2 points and cut the piece of plywood. Okay. So it's important to, have some scrap around and things like that. You don't have to have paper, you don't have to have a notebook, just draw those things out like that. Any questions on that? Again, whenever you have an angle here like this, they're always going to describe it as to the long point to the short point. And so he would probably say, like, from the factory edge, cut me off square 57 1/8, then come down on the right side 13 1/4, come across the bottom 22 inches, and they're usually kind of watching you to make sure you're not misinterpreting anything as well.